Today we're going to be going over the Kraken Hybrid bass by Solemn Tones. Kraken Hybrid is a MIDI bass instrument that allows you to reinforce or enhance bass tracks that you already have existing in your tracks already, or if you want to completely write one from scratch and just completely ditch having a real bass in general, you can also do that as well. There's a ton of different bass VSTs on the market, but Solemn Tones wanted me to check theirs out today, so I wanted to do that for you guys and take you guys through a quick little demo that I put together, and we can go through and check out all of the different tones and options that they have in this new version. Now in this session I have a quick demo that I just put together really quick for this, and I want to go over just essentially what the bass sounds like before we go into all of the details about how to use the sampler and all of those things. So as you guys can tell, it sounds great and it really fills out the low end, and now I want to go over a little bit more of the details and how this plugin can come into your workflow. When you open up the plugin, you're going to be greeted with this little drop down menu where it says select a preset. This is essentially how you're going to have to start the plugin every time, and pretty much what you need to do here is figure out what kind of sound you're going to go for. Now, for most producers, we would probably want to choose the clean DI, as a lot of us have these kind of set plugin chains that we'd want to use. But for most people who are writing and they just want to get a quick tone on there and just be able to get moving as quick as they can, this is awesome because there's a bunch of tones made out for you here. We have the clean DI tone, which is just essentially exactly what came off of the pickup when recording. We have Kraken Forge, which is going to be a bass forge modeled amp. We have the thick hard rock, which is going to be a pod farm bass tone. We have Kraken Glass, which is going to be a B7K model from Dark Glass. We have the Gnarly 666, which is actually going to be an Ampeg SVX model. And then Planet Saturn, which is actually what I'm assuming is pretty close to what the Nolly bass tone is that he's done on Nail the Mix and a couple other things where he's shown off how he's done his bass tone. For this track, I used the Kraken Glass though. This tone was the easiest that fit right into the mix, and I just didn't really even have to do too much other than some basic compression just to get things sitting really, really tight, and then just a little bit of EQ to take out a couple areas where it was kind of competing with the guitars and kick. Now I'm going to go through and show a couple of these options off back to back just so you can get an idea of how this sounds. So obviously we have a bunch of different options you can pick when starting to use this plugin. You can always change this after the fact, and it loads really quickly when you're changing between things, and all you have to do when you're making sure you're switching between plugins is to make sure that this little purple bar at the top right here is loaded. So I'm going to switch from one preset to another just so you guys can see what I mean. For slower computers, it may take a little longer to completely reach up to that point, but once you reach that point, all of the samples have been loaded and you shouldn't have any issues once it's loaded up. So the next button I want to talk to you guys about is the Swift button. This one is a pretty easy button if you just want to be able to have low end in your track and not have an empty space, and you really just want to have the bass there, but it's nothing too important. This is for people who don't really want to spend the time to do all the key switches and all of that. This will just be a more hands-off approach to being able to program bass. When you have Swift turned off, that means you're going to be relying on the key switches. The key switches are going to allow you to not only humanize, but be able to change the sound and performance of the bass. Now onto the key switches area. If you click the info tab right here, you're able to see all of the key switches and all of the different types of things you can do. So I'm going to do a quick demonstration and go through and add in a couple key switches just so I can show you how quickly you can change the sound with just adding in a couple different notes. First of all, I'm going to play it in swift mode just so you guys can get a baseline for how it normally sounds with no key switches. So obviously right there, we have something that is obviously going to work for a demo, and it sounds decent enough to pretty much fill up our low end, but it doesn't really sound like a real bassist. Now all we got to do is add in all of those pieces that we just added in, and now we can play with this. And now let's get a look of what these key switches can do in the middle of a song. So as you guys can tell, those key switches make it sound so much better in the track, and I absolutely love the new pop and slap features that they've thrown in there, and I think it really allows the bass to really cut through the mix, and I think it does add a little bit of a more realistic sound, because I feel that a lot of people, when they program MIDI bass, often just go for a straight alternative picked sound the whole time. And if you really just take more than like 2 seconds to just go in and put in these key switches, you could really make an insane difference to your track. Now that we've gotten a general idea of how this plugin works and how to get everything programmed, there's a couple other features that you could talk about when it comes to now trying to get this to fit into your track, and maybe we want to add a little bit more realism to it. The first thing I want to talk about is this little area right here, which is just a little bit of a pickup EQ area where you can do a little bit of an air boost, a little high, mid, and low. You can do cuts, pretty much whatever you want there. And then you also have this output knob, which is really nice just in case you want to get things a little quieter or louder, but without having to do it on the plugin or the fader. This enforce area is really cool because you can actually enforce your bass with a sine wave, which the whole time I've actually been playing this for the full song mix. I've been having the enforce on there because it really just adds a little bit of low end, and it just allows everything to sit tightly in the mix. With the enforce knob, you do have a couple different options though. You can do a sine wave, a square wave, or a triangle wave. These are all going to have different varying options, and I'll show you what those sound like. Now here's about the amount of enforce that I would normally use on a bass track. As you guys can tell, there's just a little bit there, and when I remove it, there's just going to be a little bit of lacking low end. Right down here with the enforce volume knob, you can actually just increase or decrease the volume that the enforce is playing through. There's also an attack knob, and then there's also an artificial attack knob where you can also play with the attack that the bass sound has. In the playing section, you have a couple different options here as well. You have a knob for bend intensity, decay intensity, and tuning. These few knobs are going to allow you to kind of fine tune the bassist to what you would prefer the bassist to be playing if you were recording somebody. So this will allow you to say, okay, this guy would normally bend a little harder, or maybe this person bends softer when they play normally. You can kind of just fine tune it to see wherever you want to fit. And this will also affect the key switches, so when you decide to use bends or slides or anything like that, you'll have those options there. You also have this slide speed right here, which will allow you to affect the key switch, which is going to be for the slides. Down here you have a pretty cool section that I haven't really seen in a lot of bass samplers, which is the human error section. This area is going to allow you to add in string noise, left hand noise, and muting noises when you are playing your MIDI bass. So this is pretty cool because it'll allow you just to make it feel a little bit more realistic than it already does. So I'm going to put this on here and I'm going to turn everything up maybe just a little too intense so you guys can get an idea of what it sounds like. So as you guys can tell, there's just a little bit of actual human error in there, and it just really makes it sound like there's a real bassist playing. The whole idea behind that is just being able to make it just slightly more realistic, so when you're listening back to it, it just doesn't feel as robotic. All around, I think this is an awesome bass sampler for pretty much anyone to check out, and I think Solemn Tones has really outdone themselves with this one. The Kraken Hybrid has some pretty cool sounds, and although I feel like I would probably mostly stick to using the clean DI, there's some awesome tones when you can just get straight to writing, and I think that's primarily where MIDI bass should be used in general in the writing process, but I think this one also stands the test to where it could be finally used in a real mix. If you like what you heard in this video, make sure to go check out Solemn Tones' new Kraken Hybrid bass down in the description below. And if you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit like and subscribe to stay up to date with all of the new content that we're going to be putting on this channel.